You're listening to Odyssey, A Tale from the Road, an audiobook by Christopher Cologne. All rights reserved. Any resemblance to persons living or dead are purely coincidental.
Chapter 21. Eddie lead us to what had once been a children's playground. Though I hardly think any children played there recently. I imagine that the last kids that played here are probably being visited by their grandchildren right about now. This was a playground out of some disturbed kid's nightmare. All the jungle gym bars had rusted from neglect. The swing set had been turned into a crossbeam with chains dangling from it. No swing seats were attached to those chains, probably vandalized a decade ago. The seesaws had become rotten and warped and were in no position to hold even a child's body weight. On the far end of the playground, there was a row of park benches, which had also served as sleeping bunks for the denizens of the park. Most of the benches were covered with blankets and newspapers, and prone bodies of people who were either sleeping, passed out from drugs, or just dead. I feared the people in the playground the most. They were the outcasts of the outcasts. Southland Park may have been the home to a small army of junkies, but at least, a majority of those junkies had utilized the abandoned houses to their advantage. I've been to several places where people were squatting, and sometimes I was impressed with their ingenuity. Just because they were living in a home that was not necessarily theirs, didn't mean that they had to live without electricity, or plumbing, or, in one case I saw, cable television. Necessity is the mother of invention, and I've seen people outfit their makeshift homes with all sorts of peculiar creature comforts. The people that lived in the park were true extremists. They chose to be there, and that scared the hell out of me. They had absolutely nothing to lose. We followed Eddie, past more gawking zombies. I heard the twang of the guitar and the voice of a world-weary man. As we approached, I saw the singer standing there with the guitar case at his feet as if to ask for change. He couldn't be serious. First of all, nobody around here was charitable enough to give their spare change. That money was relegated to purchase narcotics. Even if one of the passers-by did drop in a quarter or dime, one of these other vultures would rob him blind, pun intended. Damned ragamuffins. He's singing a twisted song about being sent to hell, and the devil has put his head on backwards as punishment for trying to see the future. I remembered Layla's description of his voice, and she was right. It was tragic, yet beautiful at the same time. Just a man and his guitar. It was so simple. His guitar playing and voice had struck a chord in my heart. It was magic in its own weird way. The music made me depressed. Not in the music quality, I admired his technique. The music seemed to reach into your chest and twist your guts around. I could only wish that my music had that effect on people. I didn't want to make people depressed, that wasn't my goal. I just wanted to elicit a reaction out of people the way Bruce's music had made me feel physically ill. Yet I didn't want to turn away. I wanted to plunge deeper into the abysmal void of the music. Baptism of fire. To forge my skills to that level. He wasn't playing fast. He wasn't playing loud. Yet it moved me. Me and my bandmates get up on a stage, use amplifiers, and play at blistering speeds and deafening volumes, and we don't get this kind of reaction. People move, slam dance, and mosh to our music. But, did our music reach our audiences, the way his music was reaching me? It made me feel embarrassed, and small. Like everything I practiced for and played in front of people was useless. I was just going up on stage to stroke my ego. I wasn't a real musician. I was a fraud, who was stealing other people's music. I didn't deserve, even the slightest of, accolades. That's how good his music was. It made you sad, and you still wanted more. There were other playground citizens around Bruce, listening to his music. We joined the semi-circle of listeners as Bruce continued to play. I looked over to Eddie, and I could read on his face that the music was affecting him too. It hurt him. He's had enough suffering in his life. The music might have killed him if he kept listening. Luckily, he broke the trance and spoke to me. The talking helped ease my pain also. That's him. Damn, he's a good player. Why are you looking for him? What useful information would he have for you? I was told that he may have some information on botched gun transaction. It led to the death of some undercover federal agents. It's all tied to Arnie Ellis, yet nobody has come forward with credible evidence. I need to find out what he knows. Maybe he has enough information to get Arnie off the streets. Eddie looked at me, confused. Has the music business got so slow, that you've taken a side gig as a private detective? Since when do you give a shit about the whale's gun running, dot. I explained, ever since he's put a price on our heads. He wants us dead. We blinded his son when we got into a fight at a strip club. That was you guys? I heard about that. Damn, word does spread fast. I guess we've all become famous, but for all the wrong reasons. This isn't the kind of celebrity I would have wanted. Believe it, baby. Eddie had a weird energy in his voice. I heard that Arnie wants this to stay out of the media spotlight, because when he finds the guys who did that to his son, he has a special brand of torture waiting for them. Oh great, just what I always wanted to be famous for. To be the guy that Arnie Ellis made disappear. Maybe I should record a song, so after my death, I could be touted as a musical genius, who died way before his time. I'll become the thing of urban legend. The guitar player that got struck down in his prime by an underworld boss. That should rack up some money to leave behind for my parents, and maybe I write in my last will and testament, money to be left to Penny's favorite charity. That'll show the world how much I loved her. Still pining after Penny, huh? Eddie said, I forgot how much you obsessed over that chick. Dude, you used to sound like a stalker. You used to talk about all the things you would say when you met her and how you would win her over. That couldn't be healthy. There's fine line between stalking and true love. Stalking usually means that the person doesn't like you, and would prefer you leave them alone. Penny hasn't met me yet. She doesn't see what a wonderful person I could be. Once we meet and she gets to know me, she will end up loving me as much as I love her. She just doesn't know it yet. Dude, you sound fucking scary. Like the kind of guy that digs around in a girl's trash or calls the house pretending to be someone else, just to hear the sound of her voice. Eddie looked at me weirdly. I pretended that I wasn't hurt by what he said. I'm insulted that you would insinuate that I have done such things. You never did those things because you don't have her phone number or know where she lives. So you can't go through her trash. You freak. He wanted to sound like he was kidding, even though I knew he wasn't. I gave in, okay. I'm a stalker. But, I won't be a stalker, if I don't get home. I hope this guy can help me. We listened to Bruce finish his last song of his set. A small appreciative round of applause spread across the derelicts in attendance. As expected, nobody listening to the music had left any money in the guitar case Bruce had laying in front of him. I knew I had some pocket change, from when I switched my personal belongings over into the clothes Farmer Neil gave us. I knew that if he heard me drop some coins into the case, it would help break the ice, into what I was really here to see him for. I walked over and plunked the coins down in a way that was certain to make some noise. I was almost convinced that the people around us would tackle me from behind, to see if I had any more spare change. Then again, I've had the ham, not so successfully, tucked in under my arm, and nobody had taken a swipe at it. That ham was too big to try to hide under my arm, so I just held it like a football. It got lots of looks, but no actions. Bruce stood there motionless as I dug in my pocket for the change and dropped it in his guitar case. He stood for a moment after he played. You would think he would start to pack up, but he didn't. It was like he was waiting just for me to come over and drop money in the case. How did he know I was coming over? I could swear that he was faking his blindness, because after I dropped the money, he pointed his face directly at me. He knew I was there. Once again, how? I couldn't see his eyes through the dark sunglasses he had on. Was it the law that blind people needed to wear sunglasses? You didn't have to do that. Bruce said, looking at me. More like he was looking through me. I was totally convinced he was faking his infirmity. Isn't that why you have the guitar case out on the ground? 4 tips? You played well, and I'm tipping you. Nobody else has. Consider yourself lucky somebody appreciates your skills enough to pay you. What I'm saying is that, you yourself didn't have to tip me. If you wanted to ask me about what I know, you could have just asked. You didn't have to give me money, he said and smiled. I was taken aback. How do you know? How do you know I wanted to ask you about some information? He smiled full of himself. I heard you tell your friend, while I was playing. Then I remembered that Layla told me about his strong sense of hearing. She told us that Bruce was able to single out individual sounds and just listen to them, all while drowning out all the background noise. But, he was playing music and singing. Was he able to do all that and still focus on the conversation I was having with Eddie? That ability was almost supernatural. I got nervous. You heard everything. Yes. Now, I got a question for you. Why shouldn't I turn you into Arnie Ellis myself? I may think that he's a low-life degenerate, but in a matter like this, he would reward me handsomely for turning you in. He doesn't know that I know what I know about that gun transaction. I'm neutral in his book, and if I turn you in, I'll be on his good side. And I'll reap all the benefits that come with it. I wanted to tell him that we were 5 young men, 4 of which were very healthy and could easily thrash this old blind man for making threats. I wanted to tell him that if Arnie knew that the blind man overheard that particular conversation, Bruce would be in just as much trouble as we were. I wanted to tell him that if he didn't help us, I would get him in trouble too. But that's what I wanted to do. He was in no position to make threats. I didn't do that. I wanted to handle this diplomatically. I said, we have a mutual friend. Hold out your hands. Both of them. Boy, let me tell you something. If this is some kind of trick, he shook his head, I will holler out to my peers here about the value of your hides. You won't make it out of this playground alive. Then you'll just have to trust me. Hold out your hands. Reluctantly, he let go of his guitar, that hung from a strap around his neck. He held his hands out, and for that one moment he looked like a beggar. Before he had stood with a quiet dignity and commanding presence when he played his music. Now with his arms outstretched and unknowing, he looked vulnerable. He wasn't the type that wanted to seem weak. So it was a big leap of faith to trust us. How trustworthy could he be? He had listened into our whole conversation without permission. If I had accidentally revealed any nefarious plans, then he would have known already. He would have never let on that he overheard us. He knew we could be trusted. I think that's why he was being so bold in the beginning of our exchange. I took the canned ham and placed it gingerly in his palms. He had no idea what to expect. I didn't want him to drop the heavy can. After I let go, his hands instantly went into their search protocol. I could see, by the look on his face, that he had a good idea of what he was holding in his hands. But that didn't solve the riddle of who our mutual friend was. I didn't want to leave him in the dark. Layla says that she misses you and that she loves you.
Please visit twostrangersonePodcast.net.